The cashier's smile disappeared when my card was declined for the third time. I stood there in the checkout line at Meijer on a Tuesday afternoon, holding a bag of Julian's childhood favorite cookies and 2 bottles of prescription medication I needed for my blood pressure. The machine beeped its rejection again. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. We'd love to know how far our stories are going. Behind me, a woman with a full cart sighed loudly. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. "Let me try another card." But I didn't have another card. I had one checking account, the same one I'd maintained for 43 years at First Michigan Credit Union. The same account where my late husband Thomas had deposited his paycheck every 2 weeks for 38 years before the cancer took him. The cashier, a young woman with kind eyes and a name tag that read Ashley, leaned closer. "Ma'am, the system says insufficient funds. Would you like me to hold these items while you call your bank?" I felt heat crawl up my neck. The woman behind me made that sound again, that impatient exhale that said I was wasting her time. I wanted to explain that this was impossible, that I'd had $47,000 in that account last week. I'd checked the balance carefully before writing the check. The check Julian had asked me to write. I started, then stopped. My hands were shaking as I pushed the items back toward Ashley. "I'll come back." I didn't come back. I sat in my car in the parking lot for 20 minutes before I could make my hands work well enough to dial the bank. The automated system cheerfully informed me my current balance was $384.72. My chest felt tight. "There must be a mistake," I told the representative when I finally got through. Her name was Bridget. She sounded about 12 years old. "Let me check your recent transactions, Mrs. Fairchild." I heard keyboard clicking. A long pause. "I see a check cleared on December 18th for $200,000, made payable to University of Michigan Medical Center. December 18th, 5 days ago, the day before Julian's admission for the experimental treatment." "That's," I said, then couldn't finish. "That was my retirement. That was Thomas's life insurance. That was supposed to last me another 20 years. "Is there a problem with the transaction?" Bridget asked. "No," I whispered. "No problem. But there was a problem. I'd written the check for $200,000, yes. Julian had asked me to, had looked at me with his father's eyes and said the treatment was his only chance. But I'd written it from my savings account, the one with the money market rates, not from checking. Never from checking. Someone had moved the funds. I drove to the hospital that evening, St. Joseph Mercy Ann Arbor, where Julian had been admitted to the experimental oncology wing. The same hospital where Natasha worked as a senior biomedicine researcher. The same hospital where she'd promised to take care of everything. The lobby smelled like antiseptic and cafeteria coffee. I'd been here so many times during Thomas's treatments that the smell alone made my stomach turn. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button for the 6th floor, and tried to smooth down my coat. I was wearing the same clothes I'd worn to the grocery store. I hadn't gone home to change. The 6th floor reception desk was staffed by a middle-aged woman with reading glasses on a chain. She looked up when I approached, her expression professionally neutral. "I'm here to see Julian Fairchild," I said. "Room 624. She typed something into her computer, frowned, typed again. "I'm sorry, but you're not on the approved visitor list." My mouth went dry. There must be a mistake. I'm his mother. "I understand, but the patient's designated care partner has restricted visitors to immediate medical family only." She spoke carefully, like she'd said this before to other people. "You'll need to contact the care partner to request addition to the list." "The care partner is his wife," I said. "Natasha Rowan. She knows who I am." The woman's expression shifted to something that looked like pity. She turned her monitor slightly so I could see. There, in a digital form dated December 19th, was a section labeled Visitor Restrictions. Under Reason for Restriction, someone had typed, "Mother of patient, risk of emotional interference with treatment protocol." The words were in a standard medical form, but I recognized the phrasing. I'd heard Natasha use those exact words before, talking about other patients' families. Emotional interference, like love, was a contamination. Can I? I started, my voice cracking. Can I just leave something for him? The cookies. I left them in the car, but I could go get them. The receptionist's pity deepened. I'm sorry. All items for restricted patients must be approved by the care partner first. I stood there for a moment longer, staring at that screen. Then I turned and walked back to the elevator. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else. I didn't go home. I drove to the house Julian and Natasha had bought 3 years ago in the Burns Park neighborhood. It was a beautiful craftsman with a front porch and an oak tree in the yard. I'd helped them pick out curtains for the living room. Natasha's car was in the driveway. A silver Audi that she'd bought last year. The one she'd mentioned cost more than my first house. I rang the doorbell. Waited. Rang again. The door opened. Natasha stood there in expensive loungewear, her dark hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. She looked surprised to see me, but only for a second. Then her expression went smooth and professional. Mabel, she said, not Mom, which she'd called me for the first year of their marriage. Just Mabel. This isn't a good time. I went to see Julian, I said. They wouldn't let me in. I know. I left specific instructions. She didn't look sorry. The treatment protocol is very delicate. Any additional stress could compromise his immune response. I'm his mother, which is exactly why your presence would be stressful. Natasha leaned against the door frame, blocking the entrance. Mothers are naturally anxious. That anxiety transfers to patients. Studies show that maternal worry can actually decrease treatment efficacy by up to 40%. She said it so smoothly, like she was reading from a research paper. Like my love for my son was a statistical problem to be managed. I paid for that treatment, I said quietly, and we're very grateful. Natasha's smile was thin. But the money doesn't change the medical reality. Julian needs a calm, controlled environment right now. When he's stronger, we'll reassess. When will that be? Hard to say. Weeks, maybe months. She straightened, preparing to close the door. I'll keep you updated. Natasha, please. I have to go. I have a conference call in 5 minutes. The door was already closing. Take care of yourself, Mabel. The lock clicked. I sat in my car outside their house until the streetlights came on. Through the living room window, I could see Natasha moving around, talking on her phone, laughing at something. I thought about the night 3 months ago when Julian had told me about the diagnosis. We'd sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he'd done his homework as a child, where Thomas had taught him to play chess, where I'd served Sunday dinners for 40 years. They caught it early, Julian had said, trying to sound optimistic. Dr. Webb says there's this new experimental treatment. Very promising. How much will it cost? I'd asked. Mom, you don't have to. How much? $200,000. But the insurance might cover some of it. Insurance covered nothing. Experimental treatments never were. I'd gone to my desk and pulled out the checkbook Thomas had used during his own treatment. The same pen he'd held with shaking hands to sign payment after payment after payment. I'd written the check that night while Julian sat across from me and said, Mom, I don't know how to thank you. Natasha is the best thing that ever happened to me. She's going to make sure I get through this. I'd believed him. Now I drove home to my small rental apartment, the place I'd moved to after selling the house to help with Julian's initial medical bills. The apartment smelled like the neighbors cooking and had thin walls that let me hear everything. I heated up a can of soup and ate it standing at the counter. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photograph of a document, a form from the hospital. I had to zoom in to read it, but when I did, my soup went cold in my mouth. Patient Visitor Restriction Form, Julian Fairchild, DOB 03-15-1984. Reason for restriction. Mother demonstrates patterns of emotional volatility and interference with medical decisions. Presence poses risk to patient stability and treatment adherence. At the bottom, in neat blue ink, was Natasha's signature, and the date, December 17th. The day before, I'd written the check. The registered letter arrived on December 27th, exactly 1 week after I'd been turned away from Julian's hospital room. I knew what it was before I opened it. The envelope was too thick, too official. The return address said, University of Michigan Medical Center, Department of Experimental Oncology. I signed for it at my apartment door, the postal worker giving me a sympathetic nod like he could sense bad news. I carried it to my kitchen table and sat down in the same chair I'd sat in every morning for the past 3 months. The same chair where I ate breakfast alone, where I paid bills I could barely afford, where I'd started keeping a notebook of dates and times because my memory wasn't what it used to be. The letter was 4 pages long, printed on hospital letterhead, and written in language so dense I had to read each sentence twice. Dear Mrs. Fairchild, it began, and I noticed immediately that Natasha had written Mrs. instead of Mabel, formal, distant. Regarding patient Julian Fairchild's participation in clinical trial protocol M447, we must inform you of necessary visitor restrictions implemented to ensure optimal treatment outcomes. Recent studies published in the Journal of Oncological Psychology demonstrate that maternal anxiety during experimental treatment phases can compromise patient immune response by up to 40%, leading to decreased efficacy of novel therapeutic interventions. I read it again, then a third time. She was using science to justify abandoning me, using research papers and statistics and medical jargon to make it sound like my love for my son was dangerous. The letter continued for 3 more pages. It cited studies I'd never heard of, referenced protocols I didn't understand, and concluded with a paragraph that made my hands shake. For the duration of Protocol M447, we strongly recommend limiting patient contact to designated primary care partners who have received appropriate training in emotional regulation techniques and stress management protocols. This restriction is implemented solely in the best interest of patient welfare and treatment success. At the bottom, 2 signatures, Natasha Rowan, Ph.D. Dollar, and Dr. Marcus Webb, Director of Experimental Oncology. I set the letter down on the table, right on the spot where Julian used to do his math homework when he was 10 years old. I remembered sitting next to him, helping him understand fractions, watching his face light up when he finally got it right. He'd been so proud. Look, Mom, he'd said, I'm smart like Dad. Now that same table held a letter telling me I was too emotional, too anxious, too much of a mother to be trusted near my own son. I went to the hospital every day anyway. I didn't try to go up to Julian's room. I knew they'd just turn me away again. Instead, I sat in the lobby on the 1st floor, in a chair near the elevators where I could watch people come and go. I brought a book I never read and a cup of coffee I never finished. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but I couldn't stop. On the 4th day, January 2nd, I saw Dr. Marcus Webb step out of the elevator at 11:47 a.m. I'd learned his schedule by then. He always came down around lunchtime, heading to the cafeteria or sometimes leaving the building entirely. Natasha was with him. They walked past me without noticing I was there. I might as well have been part of the furniture. They were talking in low voices, heads close together, and then Natasha said something I couldn't quite hear, and Dr. Webb laughed. It was a genuine laugh, easy and comfortable, the kind of laugh you share with a friend, not a professional colleague. I stood up and followed them. They took the hallway toward the medical staff offices, not the cafeteria. I stayed back far enough that they wouldn't notice, but close enough to see them turn into a small conference room at the end of the corridor. The door didn't close all the way. I shouldn't have done what I did next. I knew it was wrong, but I walked down that hallway and stood outside that conference room, and I listened. Perfect timing with the holiday schedule, Dr. Webb was saying. Most families are distracted, makes the transition smoother. She's been coming to the lobby, Natasha's voice, sitting there every day like some kind of ghost. Has she tried to contact the patient directly? No. She's following the restrictions. For now. A pause. Papers rustling. And the financial situation? Dr. Webb asked. Completely clear. She liquidated everything. The payment cleared December 18th. No complications. Good. The last thing we need is family members asking questions after they've already committed the funds. Another pause. How's he responding to the increased dosage? Confused? Disoriented? Exactly what we expected at this phase. Natasha's voice was clinical, detached. The nausea is worse than the previous trial group, but nothing unmanageable. And he's not asking about his mother? He asked once. I told him she was dealing with her own health issues and couldn't visit. He accepted it. My son had asked for me, and she'd lied to him. I stood there in that hallway, my back pressed against the cold wall, and felt something break inside my chest. Perfect, Dr. Webb said. Let's keep her isolated for at least another month. By then, we'll have the data we need from this phase. What if she becomes a problem? She won't. His voice was confident. She's already signed all the consent forms. And even if she tried to make noise, who would believe her? A retired accountant with no medical background questioning a program run by a top research hospital? It would look like grief, maybe early dementia. Natasha laughed. It was a small sound, but it cut me like a knife. You're terrible, she said, but she was still laughing. I walked away before I could hear any more. Back in my apartment, I read the letter again. This time, I took notes. Journal of Oncological Psychology. I looked it up online. The journal existed. The study Natasha cited existed. But when I actually read the abstract, it said something different than what she'd claimed. The study was about patient stress, yes, but it specifically mentioned that family support improved outcomes. Isolation made things worse. She'd twisted the research to say what she wanted it to say. I made a list of every medical term in the letter and looked them up one by one. Emotional regulation techniques, stress management protocols, novel therapeutic interventions. They were all real terms, but none of them actually justified keeping a mother away from her son. At 9 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mrs. Fairchild? A woman's voice, older, professional. This is Dr. Iris Chen. I work in hospital administration. I'm calling about your son. My heart stopped. Is Julian okay? Physically, he's stable, but I need to ask you some questions about his treatment protocol. A pause. Are you aware that the experimental program he's enrolled in was flagged by our internal review board? Flagged for what? I can't discuss details over the phone, but I think we should meet. She gave me an address. A coffee shop 3 blocks from the hospital. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., don't tell anyone you're meeting with me. And Mrs. Fairchild? Yes? Bring any financial documentation you have related to your son's treatment. Payment records, receipts, anything. The line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table with every piece of paper I had spread out in front of me. The check I'd written for $200,000. The bank statement showing where the money had gone. The consent forms I'd signed, barely understanding what they said. And the letter from Natasha, sitting in the center of it all. I thought about Thomas, about the nights I'd spent holding his hand while he suffered through his own treatments. I'd promised him in those final days that I would never abandon someone I loved, that I would fight for them, no matter how hard it got. But I hadn't fought. I'd believed Natasha when she said she knew best. I'd trusted her because Julian loved her, because she had the degrees and the credentials and the confidence I didn't have. I'd let her take my son away from me. The apartment was silent except for the sound of my neighbor's television through the thin walls. I could hear canned laughter from some sitcom, normal sounds of a normal evening in a normal life. But nothing about my life was normal anymore. I picked up the letter and read it one more time. This time, I saw it for what it really was. Not medical advice, but a weapon. Every word carefully chosen to make me feel small, ignorant, helpless. To make me believe that loving my son was something shameful, something that needed to be managed and controlled. Maternal anxiety, the letter said. What it meant was mother's love. And Natasha had used that love against me, had turned it into something contaminated and dangerous, had convinced me that the best thing I could do for Julian was to stay away. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my purse. Tomorrow morning, I would meet Dr. Chen, and I would start fighting back. Christmas morning, I woke up alone for the first time in 40 years. The apartment was silent. No smell of coffee brewing. No sound of Thomas humming in the kitchen. No Julian's footsteps running down the stairs like when he was a boy. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of my neighbor's television through the thin walls. I'd bought a small frozen turkey dinner from the grocery store the week before, back when my card still worked. It sat in my freezer now, wrapped in plastic, marked $4.29. I'd spent 40 Christmases cooking elaborate meals for my family. This year, I would heat up processed food and eat it alone. I didn't bother getting dressed. I sat at my kitchen table in my bathrobe and stared at my phone. No messages, no calls. Julian was in the hospital, less than 3 miles away, and I couldn't even send him a text to say Merry Christmas. Natasha had made it clear. No contact meant no contact. I thought about calling my sister Iris. We hadn't spoken in almost 4 years, not since the argument at Thomas's funeral. She'd wanted me to sell the house immediately, said I was being sentimental and foolish to hold on to it. I'd told her she didn't understand what it meant to lose someone you'd spent 40 years loving. "You're not the only one who's lost people, Mabel," she'd said, her voice cold. "But the rest of us don't use grief as an excuse to make stupid decisions." I'd told her to leave. She had. Now I sat in my small apartment, the house long since sold to pay Julian's medical bills, and wondered if Iris had been right all along. My phone buzzed. For a moment, my heart jumped. But it was just a spam text about extended car warranties. I put the phone face down on the table. I met Dr. Iris Chen at the coffee shop the day after New Year's. Not my sister Iris, I realized when I arrived. Just a coincidence of names that felt like the universe mocking me. Dr. Chen was a thin woman in her early 50s, with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a bun and tired eyes that suggested she didn't sleep much. She was already seated when I arrived, a laptop open in front of her and 2 cups of coffee on the table. "Mrs. Fairchild," she said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "Thank you for meeting me." I sat down, my purse clutched in my lap. I'd brought everything she'd asked for: bank statements, the check I'd written, the consent forms, Natasha's letter. "I need you to understand something before we start," Dr. Chen said. "What I'm about to tell you could cost me my career. I'm only doing this because I have a son too, and if someone was doing to him what they're doing to yours, I'd want someone to tell me." My mouth went dry. "What are they doing to Julian?" She turned her laptop toward me. On the screen was a medical chart, dense with numbers and terminology I didn't understand. But I could read Julian's name at the top and the words Protocol M447 in bold. "This is your son's medication schedule," Dr. Chen said. "Do you see these dosages?" I looked at the numbers. They meant nothing to me. "This is doxorubicin," she pointed to one line. "It's a chemotherapy drug. Standard dosage for his type and stage of cancer is 60 milligrams per square meter every 3 weeks. Her finger moved. Your son is receiving 120 milligrams per square meter every 2 weeks. Is that bad? It's double the safe dosage, administered more frequently than recommended." She pulled up another document. "And this is vincristine. He's getting triple the standard amount." I felt cold. Why would they do that? Because Protocol M447 isn't about treating cancer. Dr. Chen's voice was quiet, controlled. "It's about testing how much chemotherapy the human body can tolerate before it shuts down." The hospital submitted it as a research study on aggressive treatment approaches, but what they're really doing is pushing patients to the edge to collect data. "But the consent forms," I said. "I signed consent forms. They explained everything." "Did they?" She pulled out her phone and showed me a recording. "This is from an internal review board meeting 3 months ago. Listen." She pressed play. Dr. Webb's voice came through the speaker, clear and cold. "Families rarely read the full documentation. They hear experimental and promising results, and they sign. As long as we use enough medical terminology, they won't understand what they're actually consenting to." Another voice, one I didn't recognize. "And if they do ask questions, we overwhelm them with jargon until they feel too stupid to keep asking. Works every time." Laughter. Multiple voices laughing. Dr. Chen stopped the recording. "I'm sorry you had to hear that." I couldn't speak. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set down my coffee cup. "There's more," she said. "Your son isn't the first patient in this protocol. There were 6 before him." She pulled up another document. Death certificates. 6 names I didn't recognize, all with dates within the past 18 months. They all died? I whispered. Within 3 to 6 months of starting treatment. The official cause was always listed as cancer progression, but the real cause was organ failure from drug toxicity. She closed the laptop. When families asked questions, they were told the cancer was more aggressive than expected. No one investigated further. Why not? Because the families were isolated from the patients before the worst symptoms started. Just like they're isolating you from Julian. Dr. Chen leaned forward. That letter you received? The one about maternal anxiety compromising treatment? It's standard procedure. They send it to every family member who shows signs of asking too many questions. I thought about Natasha's letter, sitting in my purse, the careful language, the scientific justification. The way it had made me feel like my love was a problem to be solved. She knew, I said. Natasha knew what they were doing. Dr. Rowan is Dr. Webb's research partner. She helped design the protocol. Dr. Chen's expression was grim. And she specifically recommended your son as an ideal candidate. Why? Because you could pay. Because you were unlikely to ask complicated medical questions. Because you trusted her. She paused. And because once the treatment started, she could control the narrative. Tell Julian you were too emotional to visit. Tell you Julian needed space. Keep you separated so neither of you could compare notes or realize what was happening. I remembered Julian sitting at my kitchen table saying, Natasha is the best thing that ever happened to me. I remembered signing the check with Thomas's pen. I remembered believing that I was helping save my son's life. I didn't go straight home after meeting Dr. Chen. I drove to the cemetery where Thomas was buried. It was cold, the ground hard with frost, and I hadn't brought flowers. I stood in front of his headstone and tried to find words, but nothing came. Thomas had been sick for 3 years before he died. 3 years of treatments, of hope and disappointment, of watching the man I loved dissolve slowly into someone I barely recognized. I'd held his hand through all of it. I'd been there for every doctor's appointment, every test result, every decision. Near the end, when the pain was too much and the morphine made him confused, he'd gripped my hand and made me promise something. Don't ever abandon someone you love, he'd said, his voice barely a whisper. No matter how hard it gets. You stay, you fight, you don't let them face it alone. I'd promised. I'd held his hand until he stopped breathing. Now I stood at his grave and realized I'd broken that promise. I hadn't stayed with Julian. I hadn't fought. I'd let Natasha convince me that leaving was the loving thing to do. That my presence was harmful. That the best way to help my son was to disappear. I'm sorry, I said to the headstone. I'm so sorry. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of snow. When I got home, there was a car parked outside my apartment building. A dark sedan with tinted windows. As I approached, the driver's door opened. My sister Iris stepped out. She looked older than I remembered. Her hair was completely gray now, cut short and practical. She was wearing a navy blue coat I'd never seen before, and glasses I didn't recognize. But her expression was the same, determined, impatient, slightly angry. You look terrible, she said. What are you doing here? I heard about Julian. She closed the car door. And I heard about his wife. Who told you? Does it matter? Iris crossed her arms. I tried calling you 6 times. You didn't answer. We're not speaking. We're speaking now. She walked past me toward the apartment entrance. Let me in. We need to talk. Inside my small apartment, Iris stood in the middle of the living room and looked around with barely concealed disgust at the secondhand furniture, the thin carpet, the single window that looked out onto the parking lot. You sold the house for this? I sold the house to pay Julian's medical bills. Bills for a treatment that's killing him. She turned to face me. I told you that woman was dangerous, Mabel. I told you the day I met her. You tell everyone is dangerous. And I'm usually right. Iris pulled out her phone. I've spent the past week making calls. I still have connections at Michigan Medicine from when I practiced there. Do you want to know what I found out? I sat down on the couch. Dr. Chen already told me. Dr. Iris Chen, from hospital administration? Iris actually smiled. She was one of my residents 20 years ago. Smart woman. Wish I'd had her integrity when I was still working. You contacted her? I contacted everyone I could think of who might actually give a damn about patient welfare. Iris sat down across from me. Dr. Chen is the only one who was willing to talk. The rest are too scared of Webb and his research grants. She pulled up something on her phone and showed it to me. It was a medical document, dense with technical language, but I could make out Julian's name and a list of medications. This is current as of yesterday, Iris said. Julian is receiving dosages that would be considered reckless even for end-stage patients. For someone with his prognosis, it's medical malpractice at best and manslaughter at worst. Can we stop it? We can try. She set her phone down. But we need evidence that will stand up in court. And we need it fast, because according to Dr. Chen's timeline, Julian has maybe 3 weeks before the toxicity becomes irreversible. 3 weeks. I can't lose him, I said. My voice broke. I can't lose him like I lost Thomas. Iris's expression softened. I know. That's why I'm here. We sat in silence for a moment. Outside, someone's car alarm went off, then stopped. I said terrible things to you at the funeral, Iris said finally. Things I can't take back. You were right, though. I was being sentimental about the house. You were grieving, and I should have been kinder. She looked at me. I'm not good at kind. I never have been. But I'm good at angry. And right now, that's what Julian needs. I thought about Thomas's promise, about fighting for the people you love. What do we do? I asked. Iris smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone preparing for war. We get proof, she said. And then we burn their whole operation to the ground. Iris moved into my apartment the next day. She arrived with 2 suitcases and a laptop bag, parking her sedan in the visitor spot and carrying everything up herself before I could offer to help. She set up a workstation at my kitchen table without asking, spreading out file folders and connecting her laptop to a portable printer she'd brought. You don't have to stay here, I said, watching her organize. Yes, I do. She didn't look up from her laptop. We have 3 weeks, maybe less. I'm not wasting time driving back and forth to my hotel. The apartment felt even smaller with 2 people in it. Iris took the couch, insisting I keep my bedroom. At night, I could hear her typing through the thin walls, the clicking of keys steady and relentless until 3 or 4 in the morning. She wasn't easy to live with. She left coffee cups everywhere, forgot to turn off lights, and had opinions about everything from how I organized my kitchen to what time I went to bed, but she was fighting for Julian. And after 4 years of silence between us, that was enough. On the 3rd day, Iris made contact with someone inside the hospital. His name is Robert Chen, she told me over breakfast. No relation to Dr. Chen, just another coincidence. He's a nurse on the 6th floor, worked there for 15 years. She showed me a photo on her phone. A middle-aged man with kind eyes and graying hair. He's willing to talk to us, but only off hospital grounds. We met Robert at a diner 20 minutes from Ann Arbor. He was already there when we arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a cup of coffee and a nervous expression. I could lose my job for this, he said as we sat down. My license, my pension, everything. We understand, Iris said, but people are dying. Robert looked at me, then back at Iris. How much do you know? Enough to know it's murder disguised as research, Iris said flatly. Robert closed his eyes. I've been trying to report it for 6 months. Filed complaints with the Hospital Ethics Board, the State Medical Board, even tried contacting the FDA. Nothing happened. Webb has too many connections, brings in too much research money. He opened his eyes. Your son is the 7th patient in Protocol M447. The other 6 are all dead. We saw the death certificates, I said quietly. Did you see their medical records? Robert pulled out a USB drive and slid it across the table. I made copies. Everything. Patient files, medication schedules, incident reports that never made it into official documentation. Iris picked up the drive. Why are you doing this? Because I became a nurse to help people, not watch them get poisoned for grant money. His hands were shaking. The last patient, a woman named Patricia Brennan, she was only 42. She had 2 kids. At the end, she was begging us to stop the treatments, saying they were killing her. Webb told her it was just the cancer progressing. She died 3 days later. Organ failure. I felt sick. When her family asked questions, Robert continued, Webb showed them charts and studies proving the treatment was their best option, made them feel guilty for doubting him. They left believing their mother died fighting, never knowing she died because of what we were pumping into her veins. And Natasha? I asked. Dr. Rowan, what's her role in this? Robert's expression darkened. She's worse than Webb. At least he pretends it's about advancing medical science. Dr. Rowan just sees dollar signs. He pulled out his phone and showed us a document. This is a funding agreement between Webb and a pharmaceutical company called Apex Biochem. They're paying $50,000 per patient who completes protocol M447. Completes? Iris's voice was sharp. Makes it through the full treatment cycle without dying or dropping out. Robert zoomed in on a section of text. Dr. Rowan gets 20% of every patient payment. She's made $240,000 so far from the 6 patients who completed the protocol before dying. The math was simple and horrible. 6 dead patients, $50,000 each. Natasha had earned nearly $250,000 watching people die. Your son represents another $50,000, Robert said, looking at me. If he makes it through the full cycle. How long is the full cycle? I asked. 4 months. Julian had been in treatment for 6 weeks. He had 10 more weeks to survive before Natasha collected her payment. 10 more weeks of poison being pumped into his body. Back at my apartment, Iris and I went through the files on Robert's USB drive. Patient after patient. All of them with similar patterns. Initial hope, gradual decline, desperate final weeks where they begged for the treatments to stop, and then death. Always organ failure. Always listed as complications from underlying condition. This is premeditated, Iris said, scrolling through medication logs. Look at this. Every single patient received dosages that gradually increased over the treatment period. They're not trying to cure cancer. They're testing how much poison a human body can absorb before it fails. She opened another file. And look at the patient selection criteria. They specifically target people with limited medical knowledge, strong family financial resources, and, quote, high trust indicators suggesting minimal questioning of medical authority. I thought about how Natasha had watched me for 3 years, how she'd seen me struggle to understand Thomas's medical bills, how she'd witnessed my tendency to trust doctors, how she'd noted that I would do anything for Julian. She'd chosen him because she knew I would pay, and she'd chosen him because she knew I wouldn't understand enough to stop her. There's more, Iris said. She opened a folder labeled Family Management Protocols. Inside were template letters, exactly like the one Natasha had sent me. Look at this. They have a whole system for isolating patients from their families. Step-by-step instructions on how to use medical terminology to intimidate, how to cite studies out of context, how to make family members feel like they're harming their loved ones by asking questions. One document was titled, Handling Maternal Interference. I recognized phrases from Natasha's letter word for word. It's a script, I said. Everything she said to me was from a script. Everything she's saying to Julian is probably scripted too, Iris replied. She pulled up another file. Emergency room visits. Look at this. Julian's been to the ER 4 times in the past 3 weeks for symptoms related to drug toxicity. Vomiting, seizures, confusion, irregular heartbeat. Each time, Webb ordered him back on the same medications at even higher doses. Can we use this to stop them? We can try. Iris started copying files to her own laptop, but we need more than just documents. We need testimony from someone who can explain what this means in language a court will understand. And we need to get Julian away from them before they kill him. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I opened it. It was a photo of Julian. He was in his hospital bed, eyes closed, looking so pale he was almost gray. Medical equipment surrounded him, tubes and monitors and IV lines. He looked nothing like my son. He looked like he was already dying. Below the photo, a message. Thought you'd want to see how well the treatment is going. N. My hands started shaking. Iris looked at the photo over my shoulder. Her expression went cold and hard. That's it, she said. We're going to the hospital, tonight. We didn't go through the front entrance. Robert had given us detailed instructions. A service entrance on the east side of the building, accessible with a code he'd provided. Third-floor stairwell to avoid cameras. Sixth-floor hallway, room 624. We have maybe 10 minutes before someone notices we're there, Robert had said. Get in, document everything you can, and get out. It was 2 a.m. when we parked in the hospital lot. I'd never broken into anywhere in my life. My hands were shaking as Iris led me to the service door. The code worked. The door clicked open. Inside, the hospital was quiet, but not empty. We could hear voices from the nurses' station on the first floor, the distant beep of monitors, the hum of fluorescent lights. Iris moved confidently, like she'd done this 1,000 times. I followed, trying not to think about what would happen if we got caught. Third floor, fourth floor, fifth floor, sixth floor. The hallway was dimly lit. Only every third light was on for night shift. Room 624 was at the end, door partially closed. Iris pushed it open slowly. Julian was there. He looked worse than in the photo. His skin had a grayish-yellow tint. His breathing was shallow and labored. The monitors beside his bed showed numbers I didn't understand, but I could tell from Iris's expression they weren't good. "Oh, baby," I whispered, moving to his bedside. His eyes opened, unfocused at first, then gradually clearing. "Mom?" His voice was hoarse, confused. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see you." I took his hand. It felt cold and thin. "How are you feeling?" He blinked slowly. "I don't know. Natasha says I'm getting better, but I don't feel better. I feel worse every day." Iris was taking photos with her phone. The IV bags, the medication labels, the monitors. Working quickly and efficiently. "Where is Natasha?" I asked. "She was here earlier. Said she'd be back in the morning." Julian's eyes were heavy. "She said you couldn't visit because you were sick. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. I was never sick." "Then why?" He stopped, confused. The medication made it hard for him to follow thoughts. "I asked to see you. She said you couldn't come." "I know. She lied to you." Why would she lie? Behind me, Iris had opened the closet. She pulled out Julian's phone from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. I unlocked it. Julian never changed his passcode. It was still his birthday, the same as it had been since he was 16. His text messages opened. The conversation with Natasha was at the top. I scrolled through, reading quickly. December 28th. Julian. "Can Mom visit today?" Natasha. "She's dealing with some health issues. Maybe next week." January 2nd. Julian. "I really want to see Mom. Can you call her?" Natasha. "I tried. She's not feeling up to visitors." January 7th. Julian. "Please ask Mom to come. I miss her." Natasha. "The doctors think it's best if you focus on treatment right now. Too many visitors make you stressed." But there were other messages too. Messages to Dr. Webb. January 3rd. Natasha to Webb. Patient increasingly confused. Asking for mother repeatedly. May need to adjust sedation protocols. On January 6th, Webb to Natasha. Increase lorazepam to 4 mg every 6 hours. Should reduce patient questions. January 10th, Natasha to Webb. Liver enzymes elevated. Continue protocol. January 10th. Webb to Natasha. Continue. We need at least 8 more weeks of data. If he codes, we'll adjust then. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Mom?" Julian was looking at me. "What's wrong?" I showed him the phone. "Baby, you need to read this." He took the phone with shaking hands. I watched his face as he read. Watched confusion turn to disbelief, then to horror. "She said." His voice broke. "She said if I died, the inheritance was hers." "I know. She's trying to kill me." "Yes," Julian started crying. Not the quiet tears of an adult, but the broken sobs of a child. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I dragged you into this. I made you pay for this. I trusted her and now— Stop. I held his face in my hands. You didn't know. Neither of us did. But we know now. Iris was packing his things into a bag. We need to leave. Now. I can't just leave, Julian said. I'm hooked up to all this equipment. The equipment is killing you. Iris started disconnecting monitors. You're coming with us, and we're taking you to a real hospital where real doctors can try to undo the damage Webb and your wife have done. Alarms started going off as she disconnected the last monitor. Time's up, Iris said. Move. We almost made it out. Iris had Julian in a wheelchair, moving fast down the hallway toward the service stairwell. I carried his bag and tried to keep up. Behind us, the alarms from his room were getting louder, and I could hear footsteps, voices calling out. Hold it right there. Security. 2 guards rounding the corner from the nurse's station. Keep going, Iris said, pushing the wheelchair faster. We reached the stairwell door. Iris yanked it open and started maneuvering Julian's wheelchair toward the stairs, when another voice stopped us cold. What do you think you're doing? Natasha stood at the end of the hallway, wearing scrubs and a white coat. Her hair was pulled back, her expression furious. Behind her, Dr. Webb emerged from the elevator. Taking my son to a real hospital, I said. My voice didn't shake. I was surprised by that. You're kidnapping a patient in the middle of critical treatment. Natasha walked toward us, heels clicking on the linoleum. Security, detain them. Touch my nephew and I'll have your badges, Iris said. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling 911 right now. Police and an ambulance. This patient is being held against his will and subjected to medical malpractice. Dr. Fairchild, Dr. Webb said, his voice smooth and condescending. He remembered Iris from her years at Michigan Medicine. Let's be reasonable. Your nephew is receiving cutting-edge treatment. You're poisoning him for research money. Iris cut him off. I have the files, Webb. All of them. 6 dead patients, falsified reports, financial kickbacks from Apex Biochem, and I have a nurse willing to testify. Webb's expression didn't change, but I saw Natasha's eyes widen slightly. I don't know what you think you found, Webb said, but I assure you, everything we've done is within proper research protocols. Bullshit. Julian's voice, weak but clear. I heard you. On the voicemail you left Natasha, you said if I died, you'd both get paid anyway. Webb froze. Julian, you're confused from the medication, Natasha started. I heard you! Julian's voice broke. You said, if he dies, the inheritance is yours, and you get your cut, Marcus. You were laughing. You were laughing about me dying. The hallway had gone quiet. The security guard stood there, uncertain. A nurse had appeared from the station, watching. Show them, Julian said to me. I pulled out his phone, found the voicemail, pressed play. Natasha's voice filled the hallway, clear and cold. Marcus, I'm looking at his labs. Liver's failing faster than expected. Should we pull back on the dosages? Dr. Webb's voice. No, we need the full data set. If he dies before completion, we still get the Apex payment for attempting the protocol. Plus his life insurance. You're still the beneficiary, right? Natasha, laughing. Of course, $500,000. And his mother already emptied her accounts for the treatment fee. If he dies, the inheritance is mine, and you get your cut, Marcus. More laughter. Both of them. Webb. Too profitable research. Natasha. Too profitable research. The silence after the recording stopped was absolute. The nurse at the station had her hand over her mouth. One of the security guards was staring at Dr. Webb with open disgust. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder in the quiet. That's, Natasha started, her face pale. That's out of context. We were discussing murdering my son for money, I said. That's what you were discussing. Dr. Webb's professional mask had cracked. You can't prove anything with a doctored recording. It's not doctored, Julian said. You left it on my phone 3 days ago. I was too sedated to understand it then, but I saved it. He looked at Natasha, and I saw tears on his face. I loved you. I trusted you with everything. And you were killing me for my life insurance? Julian, please, you have to understand. Natasha reached for him. Don't touch him. Iris stepped between them. Don't you ever touch him again. Sirens outside. The police were arriving. Dr. Webb turned and walked quickly toward the elevator. One of the security guards moved to stop him, and Webb actually shoved him aside. The guard grabbed his arm, and then they were both on the floor, Webb shouting about assault, about lawsuits, about his reputation. It would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Natasha stood frozen, watching her carefully constructed world collapse. She looked at Julian one more time. I never meant for it to go this far. It was supposed to be simple. Just the treatment money. But then Marcus offered the research bonus and you decided my life was worth $50,000, Julian finished. It wasn't like that. Yes, he said quietly. It was exactly like that. The EMTs arrived minutes later. They loaded Julian onto a stretcher, checking his vitals, asking questions about his medication schedule. Iris handed them the USB drive with all his medical records. He's been receiving toxic doses of doxorubicin and vincristine, she told them, for 6 weeks. He needs immediate treatment for drug toxicity and organ support. They took him to University Hospital across town, where Iris still had colleagues who could be trusted. The police took statements from all of us. I watched them put Natasha in handcuffs. She didn't fight, didn't protest. She just kept staring at nothing, like she couldn't quite believe this was happening. Dr. Webb was arrested trying to leave through the parking garage. Robert, the nurse who'd given us the files, came forward officially. By morning, 3 more nurses from the 6th floor had come forward with their own stories of patient suffering, of complaints being ignored, of being told to document false information. I rode in the ambulance with Julian. He was barely conscious, the medication and stress finally overwhelming him. I held his hand and watched the monitors, terrified that after everything, I was going to lose him anyway. I'm sorry, Mom, he mumbled at one point. So sorry. Shh. Save your strength. Made you give up everything. Your house, your money, your... Julian. I squeezed his hand. You're my son. You're worth every penny and more. Do you understand me? None of this is your fault. He cried then, quiet tears running down his pale face. I brought her into our lives. I married her. I let her hurt you. You loved someone who didn't deserve it. That's not a crime. That's just being human. I wiped his tears. And you're going to get through this. You're going to survive and you're going to rebuild your life. And I'm going to be there for every single step. That's what family does. What if I don't survive? You will. I said it with more confidence than I felt. Because you're my son, and you're Thomas's son, and we Fairchilds don't quit. We fight. And right now, we're fighting together. He closed his eyes, exhausted. I held his hand all the way to the hospital. At University Hospital, a team was waiting. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, one of Iris's former students, now head of toxicology. She took one look at Julian's labs and her expression went grim. How long has he been on these dosages? 6 weeks, Iris said. His liver enzymes are through the roof. Kidney function is compromised. Heart rhythm is irregular. Dr. Okonkwo started giving orders to her team. We need to start chelation therapy immediately, get him on dialysis, and monitor for cardiac events. They wheeled Julian away. I tried to follow, but a nurse gently stopped me. Let them work, Mrs. Fairchild. You can see him once he's stable. Iris and I sat in the waiting room. It was 4 a.m. The hospital was quiet, except for the hum of vending machines and distant beeping. What if we were too late? I said. We weren't. Iris sounded certain, but her hands were shaking. Sarah is the best toxicologist in the state. If anyone can reverse the damage, it's her. But what if... Mabel. She looked at me. We did everything right. We found the truth. We got him out. We got him help. That's all we could do. The rest is up to Julian's body now. I thought about Thomas in his final days. How I'd held his hand and promised never to abandon someone I loved. I'd kept that promise. Julian was here, fighting, and I was beside him. That had to be enough. Julian didn't wake up for 3 days. I stayed in his hospital room the entire time. Iris brought me changes of clothes and food I barely touched. The nurses brought me pillows and blankets and told me I should go home and rest. I didn't leave. Dr. Okonkwo came in twice a day to check his vitals and review his labs. Each time, she gave me the same careful, measured updates. His kidney function was improving. His liver enzymes were declining. His heart rhythm was stabilizing. But, I always asked. But the damage is significant, she said. We won't know the full extent until he's conscious and we can run cognitive tests. The drug toxicity may have caused neurological damage. On the third day, his eyes opened. Mom? I was at his side immediately. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. He looked around the room, confused. Where am I? University Hospital. You've been here 3 days. Dr. Okonkwo has been treating you for drug toxicity. His memory came back slowly. I watched his face as he remembered. The treatment, Natasha, the voicemail, the confrontation in the hallway. It was real, he said quietly. She really tried to kill me. Yes. He was quiet for a long time. Then, how bad is it? The damage? Dr. Okonkwo says your organs are recovering. You'll need ongoing treatment, probably dialysis for a while, but you should make a full physical recovery. And mentally? I hesitated. They don't know yet. Julian closed his eyes. I lost everything, didn't I? My wife, my health, your savings, the house. You lost a wife who was trying to murder you. I'd call that a win. He almost smiled. Almost. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Natasha was charged with attempted murder, medical fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. Dr. Webb faced the same charges, plus multiple counts of medical malpractice and fraud. The USB drive Robert had given us, combined with testimony from the nurses who came forward, built an airtight case. Apex Biochem, the pharmaceutical company funding the research, immediately distanced themselves from Webb and launched their own investigation. It turned out Webb had been falsifying research results for years, using their money to fund his own experiments while reporting fabricated data. The Michigan Medical Board stripped both Webb and Natasha of their licenses within 2 weeks. The trial wouldn't happen for months, but the prosecutor called me to say they had more than enough evidence for conviction. Natasha's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecutor refused. She can explain herself to a jury, he said. 6 weeks after we'd taken Julian from St. Joseph Mercy, Iris and I sat in a lawyer's office downtown. The hospital's legal team had offered a settlement, $7 million to be split between Julian and the families of the 6 patients who died in Protocol M447. They want this to go away quietly, the lawyer explained. No trial, no publicity, no admission of wrongdoing. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. No settlement. I want a trial. I want every family who lost someone to know exactly what happened and why. I want it on record. The lawyer exchanged a glance with Iris. Mrs. Fairchild, a trial could take years. It would be expensive, emotionally exhausting. I don't care. I kept my voice level. 6 people died because of what they did. Their families deserve the truth, not a settlement check and a gag order. Iris reached over and squeezed my hand. I agree with my sister. The lawyer sighed. I'll inform the hospital that we're declining their offer. Julian moved into my apartment when he was discharged. He couldn't go back to the house he'd shared with Natasha. Everything there reminded him of her, of the life he'd thought he was building, of the lies he'd believed. We slept in shifts at first. Julian on the couch, me in the bedroom. Then, after a week, he asked if he could move his mattress to the living room floor. I don't like being alone when I sleep, he admitted. I keep having nightmares that I'm back in that hospital room and no one's coming to get me. I understood nightmares. We fell into a routine. Julian had dialysis 3 times a week. I drove him to appointments and sat with him during treatments. We played cards to pass the time, war mostly because it required no strategy or thinking, just flipping cards and watching numbers. He started tutoring math online, working from the apartment. High school students mostly, preparing for college entrance exams. The work was easy for him, and it gave him something to focus on besides his broken health and broken marriage. One evening, about 2 months after the confrontation, we were eating dinner at my kitchen table when Julian set down his fork and said, "I need to ask you something." "Okay. Do you hate me?" I put down my own fork. "Why would I hate you?" "Because I cost you everything. Your house, your retirement, your savings. Because I brought Natasha into your life. Because I was too stupid to see what she was doing." His voice was shaking. "Because I almost died and would have left you completely alone." "Julian." I waited until he looked at me. "I don't hate you. I never hated you. Not for 1 second. How can you not? Because you're my son. Because you trusted someone you loved, and that's not a character flaw. That's just being human." I reached across the table and took his hand. "And because some wounds heal, but the scars stay to remind us to be more careful. That doesn't mean I regret fighting for you. It means I learned what I'm capable of when someone I love is in danger." He cried then. Not the desperate sobs from the hospital, but quiet tears of exhaustion and relief. We sat there for a long time, holding hands across the same table where he'd done homework as a child, where I'd served Sunday dinners for 40 years, where Thomas had taught him to play chess. Some tables hold more than meals. They hold entire lives. 1 year later, I stood in a courtroom and watched a jury return guilty verdicts on all counts against both Natasha Rowan and Dr. Marcus Webb. Natasha got 25 years. Webb got 30. The families of the 6 patients who died were in the courtroom. After the verdict, several of them came over to thank me for refusing the settlement, for insisting on a trial. "My mother deserved better than a check and silence," one woman said. "Thank you for making sure people knew the truth." Outside the courthouse, reporters asked if I felt vindicated. "I feel tired," I said honestly, "and grateful my son is alive." The hospital eventually settled with all 7 families. Not 7 million, 40 million. I used my portion to establish the Thomas Fairchild Medical Ethics Foundation, dedicated to helping families identify medical fraud and providing free advocacy services for patients in experimental treatment programs. Iris ran it. She was better suited for that kind of work anyway. Julian slowly recovered. His kidney function returned to almost normal. The dialysis stopped after 9 months. Dr. Okonkwo said he'd need monitoring for the rest of his life. But he would live. A full life, probably a long one. He started teaching math at a community college, bought a small apartment 2 buildings away from mine. Close enough that we could have dinner together twice a week, far enough that we both had independence. He didn't date, said he wasn't ready to trust anyone that way again. I didn't push. 2 years after that night in the hospital, Julian and I sat on the porch of a small house I'd bought with some of the settlement money. Not in Ann Arbor, a different town, a fresh start, a place with no memories of Natasha or Webb or Protocol M447. It was evening. The street was quiet. Somewhere down the block, children were playing. "Do you ever think about her?" Julian asked. "Natasha?" I considered it. "Sometimes, not often." "I do. I think about how much I loved her, how completely I believed everything she said." He was quiet for a moment. "And I think about how she looked when they put the handcuffs on, like she couldn't understand how it had all gone wrong. She gambled that no one would notice or care enough to stop her," I said. "She lost. We almost lost too. But we didn't." I looked at him. "We're here. We're together. That's what matters." Julian leaned back in his chair. "I'm glad you didn't give up on me, Mom, even when I gave up on myself. That's what family does. We fight for each other." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun set. The porch light came on automatically, casting warm light across the steps. Inside, Iris was making dinner. I could smell garlic and tomatoes through the open window. She'd moved in 6 months ago, said she was tired of living alone. We drove each other crazy sometimes, but it worked. This wasn't the life I'd imagined when I was younger. It wasn't the life I'd had with Thomas, or the one I'd dreamed of having with grandchildren and holidays and family gatherings. But it was real. It was honest. It was built on truth instead of lies. And some days, That was more than enough. It was everything.